Hello, this is Paige Boltz, Raphael Sharabani, Chloe Azuelos, and Tyler Ardman's presentation on navigating identity through punk rock in the Buddha of Suburbia. The central struggle in the Buddha of Suburbia is fundamentally about identity, specifically Kareem's impossible position between two distinct worlds that seem incompatible. Kareem's British suburban identity and his Indian heritage inherited from his father create a painful tension where he feels pressured to choose one or reject the other entirely. This reflects a broader reality for second-generation immigrants in the 1970s England. Belonging to multiple cultures often means not fully belonging to any single one. The author presents identity as something fluid and evolving rather than fixed. As Kareem moves from the suburbs to London, his sense of self shifts with each new experience and encounter. The crucial revelation here is that punk rock culture becomes the space where Kareem can finally explore and express this conflicting identity without having to choose between his heritage and his individuality. By embracing punk, he seeks liberation from the restricted expectations that demand he be either authentically British or authentically Indian, but never both. The novel asks its central question: can Kareem construct a genuine self that integrates all aspects of his identity, or will external pressures force him to permanently deny fundamental parts of who he is? Slide 2. Rejection of Indian heritage. Initially, Kareem actively rejects his Indian roots by deliberately distancing himself from anything marking him as different from his middle-class British peers. His embarrassment becomes the driving force behind his attempt to construct an entirely British identity. This rejection is comprehensive, extending across fashion, language, values, and cultural practices as Kareem essentially attempts to perform whiteness and Britishness as though his Indian heritage were merely an embarrassing costume he could simply just remove. The novel makes clear, however, that this strategy stems not from Kareem's genuine personal convictions, but from internalized racism and the powerful structural social pressures of a society that privileges whiteness and marks his Indian identity as foreign, inferior, and intrinsically other. His shame about his background reflects systemic racism embedded in British society, rather than any actual flaw in his father or Indian culture. It's a wound inflicted by living as a systematically devalued minority. Here lies Qureshi's crucial irony. Kareem's pursuit of authentic punk rebellion paradoxically depends on profound inauthenticity about his own lived experience and actual identity. While punk claims to represent genuine self-expression and rejection of conformity, Kareem's embrace of punk, while denying his heritage, actually constitutes conformity to racist hierarchies, selecting only those aspects of himself that socially legitimizes while hiding those marked as other. This tragic juxtaposition reveals how even rebellion and alternative subcultures can perpetuate systemic racism and assimilationist ideology when constructed through denial. Ultimately, Kareem's heritage rejection represents the internalization of racism, demonstrating how powerful social pressures force young people to mutilate their identities in pursuit of belonging. Slide 3. Exploration through punk rock culture. What punk rock represents in Kareem's life is something revolutionary, a form of rebellion and authentic self-expression that feels genuinely liberating compared to the failed hippie idealism that dominated the previous generation. For Kareem specifically, punk provides his escape route from suburban conformity and the inauthentic performances of his father's fake spiritual guru persona. The punk ethos, raw emotion, rejection of Polish, embrace of chaos and anger resonates with Kareem's generational frustration in ways that the commodified peace and love of hippies simply cannot satisfy. When Kareem encounters punk in its raw, unpolished form at a live performance, he feels genuine shock and recognizes something truly dangerous and outside the mainstream system of consumption. What punk offers Kareem that mainstream society cannot is a symbolic language to express his hybridity and in-betweenness, his fundamental sense of not fitting into predetermined categories. Punk's rejection of manufactured aesthetics in favor of authentic self-presentation speaks directly to Kareem's deepest need to express his genuine feelings and actual identity without performing for anyone. In essence, punk becomes far more than music or fashion. It becomes the vehicle through which Kareem can finally honor all aspects of himself without compromise or denial. Slide 4. The Consequences of Denying Your Heritage. One of the novel's most powerful cautionary lessons emerges through Kareem's initial rejection of his Indian heritage and the severe psychological toll this denial exacts on his identity and well-being. Early in the narrative, Kareem experienced such acute embarrassment about his background that he desperately attempts to distance himself from anything foreign to fit into British society, and more specifically, into Charlie's social circle. This rejection manifests in concrete, destructive ways. He actively avoids family traditions, adopts exclusively British cultural references, and refuses to acknowledge his father's influence as a legitimate part of his identity. Yet, Qureshi makes abundantly clear that this strategy of cultural denial brings Kareem no satisfaction or genuine belonging. Instead, it creates persistent internal conflict and a deep sense of inauthenticity that corrodes his emotional well-being. Kareem experiences profound tension between the punk identity he has adopted and the family expectations rooted in his Indian background, leaving him perpetually caught between two worlds with no stable sense of self. The novel's argument is unsparing. Attempting to erase a fundamental part of your identity is both psychologically destructive and philosophically impossible. You cannot successfully deny what you fundamentally are without suffering severe emotional consequences. His constant sense of disconnection and feeling out of place intensifies precisely because he's living inauthentically, denying rather than integrating his actual background and lived experience. This suggests Punk's promise of liberation becomes empty when that liberation depends on denying who you actually are. Slide 5. Kareem's integration and growth. As Kareem engages with punk culture over time, something profound happens. He begins to understand that authentic identity doesn't require choosing between his heritage and his chosen subculture. He can synthesize both. The turning point becomes when Kareem stops viewing his Indian heritage as embarrassing baggage to discard and instead recognizes it as legitimate and valuable part of his complete self. This psychological breakthrough is enabled by punk itself, which emphasizes individualism and self-determination, empowering him to claim both identities simultaneously rather than enforcing an impossible choice. Through this ongoing immersion in punk and sincere reflection on his life, Kareem discovers an authentic identity that genuinely belongs to him, one that reflects his real lived experience as someone who inherently belongs to multiple cultures and traditions. His personal growth manifests in growing artistic confidence and ambitions, reveal that accepting one's complete identity actually enables creative flourishing rather than limiting it. As Kareem reconnects with his family and deliberately incorporates his cultural roots into his self-expression, he moves beyond the reactionary rebellion that initially attracted him and toward a more mature, integrated sense of self. Qureshi's insight here is clear. Authentic identity formation doesn't mean rejecting what makes you different. It means thoughtfully integrating all aspects of yourself with your chosen affiliations and genuine beliefs.
Okay. It's not working. Hello everyone. Today I'll be talking about commodification of rebellion and art in Hanif Qureshi's The Buddha of Suburbia, using rocking London youth culture as commodity, the essay by Berkham Direnchi Saglam. So, basically the essay talks about is every youth rebellion has two possible endings. You can say small and hidden. That way you can keep your real meaning, where you can stay powerless and nobody cares. Or you become popular. And the second that happens, the system turns you into something to buy and sell, like a commodity that the essay talks about. Hippies, punks, or those types of rebellions, they all end in the same way. The system just swallows them up and spits them back out as fashion, music, or theater tickets, just like an old era. And at the end of the day, nothing in society actually changes. So, uh, here we talk about Charlie and how he became in his punk phase. The novel shows this perfectly with Charlie and the punk. Kareem and Charlie walk into a tiny South London club and see real punk. Angry working class kids, safety pins through their faces, spitting on the stage, shouting about hate. It's scary, it's raw, and it's dangerous. Charlie is blown away. He literally says this in the future. He literally says this is the future. But what does he do? He doesn't join them. He copies the look, cleans it up, changes his name to Charlie Hero, puts on a fake tough guy accent, and starts playing huge stadiums in America. Real rebellion that started in a dirty club ends up as a big money making product. That's the commodification in action. So here we'll be talking about Kareem and the theater. So it's basically exactly the same thing that happened. Uh, he thinks acting is going to make him free and let him be his true self. His first big role was Mowgli in the Jungle Book. He was dressed as an Indian man, and people were making fun of him for his Indian. He had to paint his face darker and speak with a silly Indian accent just because he's brown, and he uses that persona to make him more popular and to fit in. His real mixed race identity gets turned into exotic entertainment for a white audience who pays to see something different, something that's not Hollywood. Later, he plays angry rebel characters on stage, but the audience just claps, pays, and goes home. Nothing in the real world changes. Rebellion that could be dangerous becomes safe, paid for theater tickets.